right, Charlie, thank you for taking your time to do the interview today, man. If you could, just tell us about your clinical experience, your background, and your history.
Well, I think most people know me as a physical therapist. I've come to say over the last little while that I'm really just a physical therapist because I pay my dues to the states of New York and New Jersey every 2 years. I consider myself a strength and conditioning coach that knows how to deal with pain and serious dysfunction. And that allows me to really look at things very much on this side of strength and conditioning, and then you fill in the blanks for everything going backwards. So my version of physical therapy, I think to a lot of people, looks a lot more like strength and conditioning. So that's kind of like how I try to, if I have to, define myself and what it is that I do, etc.
Okay, gotcha. And now, based off that concept, I guess that's how you came up with the training equals rehab. Rehab equals training model,
well,
you could say?
I'll tell you, I didn't come up with it. I came up with the silly name.
Okay.
But this was almost four or 5 years ago now, where Geraldine Cooper-Smith, who's in charge of EFTI at Equinox, the gym chain, and for their Tier 4 training program, which is their highest levels of trainer, really for a big box gym, these are very competent trainers. This is not to be confused with other big box things. They're really doing things at a very high standard. So to do part of their education program, she asked me to start to brainstorm with her how to come up with some kind of educational product for them, only for Equinox. It had nothing to do with the DVD, bridging the gap between physical therapy and personal training. And my immediate response, both figuratively and literally, was that I don't think there is a gap, because I don't look at them as different. I look at things as all the same. I just look at things in terms of, okay, what do you need? And then who is the best person to deliver this? So even now, and I've hopefully done a better job of not sounding like such a jerk all the time, but I think that lots of people suck, and when you look at the big picture, there's lots of physical therapists that are much better at training people than trainers, and then there's lots of trainers that are better at helping people with serious dysfunction and even pain, and that's something I talk against quite a bit. The fact of the matter is that everyone is intelligent, and people have access to certain types of information, and if you got the skills to pay the bills, you're the one that should be dealing with it. So I have never broken any kind of boundaries in terms of teaching non-healthcare providers anything that they, in my opinion, shouldn't be doing, and it's just my opinion. I don't really care what someone else has to suggest about that, but it's really about we should know the same things, and then what is your wheelhouse? What do you do well? And it doesn't even mean there's things that are painful or serious dysfunction or general and special physical preparedness. This is all one big thing, and you just pick the spots that you do well. Maybe it's even you do well at managing the big picture in terms of physical preparedness and recovery, but someone else is better at teaching the individual lifts to a beginner. These are all different things, and that's my thought process in terms of teaching, that you do what you do well, and then decide, okay, what's next, and do you even need to be better at anything else? But when we look at the full picture and you start to see all these different qualities and you start to build out your team, this is how you make a monster.
Now, you talked about team. I mean, I know you're big on that, on developing that team. How important is that for the exercise professional or the clinician to have that team, regardless if it's a strength coach and a medical professional? How important is that in just building a business?
It's mandatory,
right.
Except for people that are not interested in keeping a very high ceiling.
Right.
So for people that aren't interested in that challenge or fail at that particular challenge, we're doing fine. They've just figuratively lowered the ceiling, because number one, you can only solve so much with a stick and a foam roller.
Right.
And you do not need to be broken and in serious pain where you cannot engage in any kind of fitness to access things that manual therapists or chiropractors or physical therapists can do. They make your workout better by adding very, very good things that you typically cannot do. This is very preparatory. So it's preparation for the preparation for something else.
Right.
And you can't be everything to everybody. And I certainly break the rules to some degree of my own message based on the blessings that I have had in terms of how I've developed as a professional But that's there's still plenty of things that I don't do well, and I need to get guidance or refer out to other people, whether I can only do certain things in certain states, or if I know this person needs X, but I'm not really good enough to do it, then we refer them out to somebody else. And I'm not sure how you can not work in a team unless you're a punk and you don't really care, or so myopic that you can't even see that there's much more. But also too, take the onus off the clinician, and maybe the client doesn't care.
Right.
And that's cool. You know, everybody needs to make money, and there's enough room for everybody. But in terms of the message that I want to bring, which is a very middle up message, I don't know how you can operate without a team unless you're Superman, and I don't know anyone that has that and has everything, has access to everything from a clinical skill level, from a logistics of the facilities that you have access to. No one has everything, and you have to access other people, and people have. You need a big toolbox, and knowing when to use what tool, etc., is just mandatory.
Okay, so I know in the training equals rehab, rehab equals training video, one of the big topics was how to dialogue with the medical professional. And you sort of called it the SFMA, or restrictive place. Is that still the same concept that you're working with in the seminar that you're going to do March 23rd, March 24th?
When I do these seminars, Brian, I couldn't even tell you until the night before what we're going to do. I think that one of the cool things about these seminars is that when you whether you know ahead of time by whoever the organizer is, they give me a little rundown of who's in the room. Obviously, I'm very accessible on social media. People know that they're coming. It's not likely that that's something. I think I've gotten a little bit of away from that. Gotcha. Because as I've changed, at least as a teacher, is not that I think this is bad information or violates anything. I think that people start to run too far with it, and that's my fault, and I'm going to fix that. So it's not likely we'll be looking at the top tier SFMA, but the bottom line is when you look at the top tier of the SFMA, these are all deeper screens in the old level 2 methodology of the functional movement screen. So when you look at the toe touch and multi-segmental extension, multi-segmental flexion, multi-segmental flexion lives as a deeper screen in your active straight leg raise, and it lives as a deeper screen for the big 3 along with extension. Multi-segmental rotation obviously could be done after rotary stability, but it's not, at least not taught in the old level 2 methodology. Cervical lives under shoulder mobility, single leg stance, and deep squatter obviously in the big 3, so they're all there. So there's no, it's not like you just package it differently. Right. But what we were very, very clear about is that you do not mess with stuff that you can't handle. And that means 2 things now. It used to just mean don't mess with pain, but now in terms of corrective, which is a term that I'm really getting away from, I'm not calling things corrective anymore. I'm calling them regressions and lateralizations. Right. And the best regressions and lateralizations move you towards an exercise or a fitness component that you want to do. But if you can't get there, you're probably beating your head against the wall if you haven't gotten there quickly. And that's not an insult, because again, you can't be everything to everybody. But where we're going to go, and whether it's with the SFMA restrictor plates, we're going to have clinical people in the room, SFMA. Let's figure out what this pattern is telling us, because that's still the same message. And this goes back to Yanda in the 60s. Our body moves in patterns. You can say muscles, move, whatever you want. We should be able to look at the 7 movements of the SFMA. Maybe we'll call it 6, take away the cervical spine, and we look at the 7 movements of the functional movement screen. That stuff has not changed as far as my thinking. And then any fitness choice that you have should live somewhere underneath those abstract fundamental patterns. And then what does that pattern tell you in terms of competency and capacity? And then you fill in the blanks. And that's about as much as, in my opinion, the algorithm gives you. Everything else is hunt and peck, and I'll show, when I try and teach, and when we look at these patterns, what do you know how to do? Because everybody just wants to, just do this and you'll be good. And that's really just bullshit. Like, I know that's what people want. I don't know how to give that to you. You can find a bunch of other frauds that I'm sure will be excited to say, oh, just do this, and at least most people will be good. It doesn't work that way. And this is a very much teach you how to fish. Now, that doesn't mean I don't show you a whole bunch of things to do, but ultimately, going back to your question, like, how do you unfold where you are, and then how do you pick things that best fit this person's profile.
So it's safe to assume that the concepts of the seminar is the same, but the message is going to be very different, and maybe the ways that you get there is going to be different. So it's not the same old information that maybe you did in your DVD, or did how to perform better, or anything along those lines. This is a brand new.
I'm not going to lie and say, oh, I saw that on the DVD. You might either,
right.
But number one, the content is so fluid in how I have this seminar set up. Number one, so I couldn't even tell you. But no, the thought process this is not just a reproduction live of what we did on the DVD. Lots of my thought processes have changed. That was 3 days of almost 8 hours each day, which I haven't done since. And there's things that I do differently. Stuff from the DVD which I would speak against. That you have to change. And I hope the stuff that I talk about with you guys in March, a couple years from now, I change that, and everything keeps growing. But the principles still don't change at all in terms of this whole training equals rehab, where things are. It's one big picture. It'll be that message is completely consistent.
Okay. Now, speaking to the clinician or the medical professional, obviously, the way that you train, the way that you treat, it's different than a lot of other dogmatic type physical therapists directly out of school or anything along those lines. What would they get out of it? What would they be able to bring into their practice and work day one with? That's maybe different what they learned at school.
And it's obviously I think that non-healthcare providers should know all the same things. Right, I don't think no one owns information. I think people might own application. So if you're a non-healthcare provider, I need you to know exactly why a high velocity, low amplitude thrust works. I just don't want you to do it. I need you to know when it's indicated. I need you to know why it's indicated. So it's not that we don't talk about these things in these courses. I just don't show you, to do a little bit of a side glide and put a little rotation and put a little, a little bit of a side bend and then smash your spine. That's not what we're doing. But in terms of how do we use the things that traditional healthcare providers can do, well, many of which they're already good at, how does that fit into the functional movement system model? And the biggest thing, I just did a seminar in Tennessee where I think, pretty much 85 to 90% were legitimate healthcare providers. So a lot of it, we were talking like, there is no more shoulder eval. You don't have that option. That doesn't mean you don't only work with the shoulder, because that might be your wheelhouse. But you cannot, we have, like, one of the things I really get across to these healthcare providers is that in a very, very short period of time, you no longer, can look at yourself in the mirror and say, I'm doing everything I possibly can do, if you do not look at the whole body. I'm not saying treat the whole body, because I respect that logistics will prevail. And when people come to see us as clinicians, something hurts, and it's our job to take away the hurt. How we do that is now up to you. And if that means doing something locally to the hurt shoulder, that's cool. And if you can get the job done by doing something to the hip that doesn't hurt, then whatever floats your boat. But we can no longer just say, well, the neck is too far away from my spine, my lower back. That's absurd. We cannot say that this is not one body. This is evidence-based, this is evidence-led, and it's common sense. And I think when traditional healthcare providers do not have a mindset of lifting heavy things and jumping very high, it's difficult for them to see that. They don't have to do it, but they have to know. And just the same way that I think our non-healthcare people need to know what the indications and the reasons and the hows and the whys, just not the what. It's got to work the other way as well. So to demonstrate the principles that allow for great training, it's the same principles. You can look at block training in traditional Eastern literature, which has nothing to do with rehab. But that's what rehab is. You have picked one quality, and you're attempting to maximize that quality. And that quality is pain-free motion. And again, this is somewhat of a bastardization of what we learned from our Eastern Bloc literature in terms of ass-kicking strength and conditioning, but it's no different. You just take the principle because that's what works. So when somebody is so banged up, this is for what the healthcare provider is. What do they need? They need pain-free. They need dysfunction, and then you start moving down your primary, secondary, tertiary qualities, and you don't put a priority on the tertiary and quaternary qualities. Just like if you were using a block, for speed, strength, you will never get good at the other things underneath it. You get good at what you want, and you super compensate, and you move on to the next piece. It's the same thing in rehab. It doesn't mean you can't work on all these other things, and I want to be able to also show healthcare providers that when you do have a pattern that has the authority for fitness, what happens to the body physiologically that seemingly has nothing to do with why the shoulder doesn't hurt anymore, but it is. So if we can train fitness in something like a deadlift, oh my God, deadlift, because now the healthcare person probably doesn't even know how to do a deadlift, or their facility is not set up for the deadlift. We go back to working in a team. But people's shoulders people's shoulders don't typically hurt when they're in a deadlift. But lots of good things are happening at the shoulder from a stability standpoint in a non-provocative position. More importantly, good things are happening to the autonomic nervous system when you apply these great fitness principles to a pattern that has the warranty to uptake these qualities. And then all of a sudden you combine that. This is where the Eastern training stuff didn't do. They only made adjustments to their training. Now we've got a neuromuscular model that the healthcare person can do. You put this together and people getting better very, very quickly. This is where your healthcare people are going to hopefully see a message that's very important and viable.
All right, fantastic. All that seems like great information. It should be a tremendous weekend. Just to recap, Somerset Fitness and Wellness, March 23rd and 24th. Charlie Rehab, training equals rehab, rehab equals training. Thank you very much.
You got it, man.